Welcome everyone. Again, we've got a really great group here today. Thanks so much for everyone taking some time out of their day to spend it with me, learning about B2B cold calling, something that's near and dear to my heart. And so, look, if you're here, it's it's probably because you're involved in cold calling in some way, and you're looking for some ways to try to improve your effectiveness in cold calling or trying to improve the effectiveness of your team. And I think today you're going to come away from this presentation with a lot of really useful, practical information. I've formatted the presentation today into really two sections. The first section is just some key insights, some of our sort of rules for the game, tips and tricks, if you will, but probably a little more substantial than tips. And so we're going to go through 5 of those things that every person making cold calls should be thinking about. Every organization involved in cold calling should be concentrated on and have a plan for. And then we'll go through some of the most common mistakes. I've got 5 common mistakes that I see organizations and individuals who are making cold calls in the B2B environment, mistakes that I see them making. So I'm going to go into those in detail and kind of help you understand why some of those things are a problem and how they could be holding you back from achieving the results that you hope to achieve through your cold calling efforts. So that's what we'll do today. And this isn't sort of a pitch-free zone, but I will introduce myself and help you guys understand who I am and why I'm talking about this. And so we'll go to the next slide. So my name is Mike Verity. I'm the CEO and founder of ProSales Connection. I started ProSales Connection about 12 years ago. And we, in the early days of the business, all we did was make cold calls for clients. That we were exclusively a sales development firm. In the last several years, we've expanded those capabilities, but really at our core is the work that we do over the phone with B2B technology clients and helping them build sales pipelines as a service. And before that, I spent another 10 or 12 years at high-tech companies doing the same thing. And so I've got nearly 25 years experience working with sales teams, optimizing their performance around inside sales, outbound calling, cold calling, prospecting. This is the work that I've done really for the balance of my career. And so I'm excited to share some of our insights with you today. So you're in the right place if you have an in-house team of sales development reps that make cold calls. If you have a team that is tasked with that specific function, it's a very popular way to organize sales organizations and marketing teams today. So if you've got a sales development team, you're in the right place. If you have a team of sales professionals that are also tasked with the cold calling to generate new sales meetings, again, there will be a lot of information for you as well. Some organizations really, what I say, stretch the salespeople into the sales development role. There's some advantages to doing that. There's some disadvantages to doing that. Maybe we'll get into some of that today. And then finally, if you're an individual salesperson and you make cold calls as a part of your job and you need to make cold calls to build your sales pipeline, I promise you're going to come away from today's conversation with some insights and some things to think about and ways to potentially improve the effectiveness of your cold calling efforts. And you might be here today because you see value in cold calling based on your own data, but you recognize that there's an opportunity to improve it. So a good prospecting organization, a good inside salesperson or sales development person is tracking their data systematically. And so you should be looking at that data and trying to figure out ways to constantly improve your effectiveness. And so you may be looking at that and thinking, look, I'm flatlined. I'm looking for ways to break through to the next level or improve the output that I'm getting from my efforts. That's a great way. That's a great reason to be here today. And you may be struggling to generate a positive return on your cold calling efforts, and you're looking for new insight, as I talked about, or you're investigating this idea of prospect calling as a pipeline development strategy for your business. There's a lot of organizations out there who've done away with cold calling. They've come to the conclusion that it's not a valuable, it's not a useful use of the resources. We obviously, wholeheartedly disagree with that. And I think that has a lot to do with a couple things. It has to do with likely, look, no one likes to make cold calls. It's not a fun thing to do. There's very few people in this world that really get up for it. Most of us are doing it because we're disciplined and we're organized and we're committed to being successful. We don't do it because we enjoy it per se. Although it can be a lot of fun when you have a successful call, a lot of people have it feels like too much work, and they're looking for an easier way to build a sales pipeline. There's been software companies for the last 15 years trying to sell solutions that are supposed to, quote unquote, eliminate the cold call because again, quote unquote, cold calling is dead. And I'm here to tell you it's absolutely not dead. It is one of the most effective ways for you to proactively build sales pipeline. We're going to talk about how to do that better today. So why is this important to you right now? Look, we've got really severely shifting market conditions at the moment. We've got a pandemic that we're dealing with. In some geographies, we've got serious depressed economies because of energy sector or other sort of microeconomic concerns, but there's a shift in the market, and all of us are dealing with it, and we all should be looking for ways to try to find a better way to generate sales pipeline. And you know, a lot of the organizations that we talked to today are totally behind on their numbers. They were impacted by COVID, their market has been impacted, their customers have been impacted, they're behind on the numbers, but as we know, numbers usually don't change. We've got to find a way to make those numbers. And so if you're behind and you're looking for an angle, you're looking for something to give you an edge, hopefully you get something today that gives you just that edge. And many people are connection deprived right now. This is another reason why this is important, why cold calling is important at the moment, is look, people are ready to talk to people. They're interested in having conversations with people. A lot of people are kind of cooped up in their homes, and they're not around their coworkers or the teams that they normally work with in a real way, and they're sort of itching to have conversations. So a positive personal outreach can really separate you from all the other marketing strategies and all the other people out there trying to get their attention. So it's a really important strategy to employ right now at this particular time. So a little bit about us. We started the business in 2009. We've built over $1 billion in sales pipeline for our clients over the last 12 years. We've done that by making over 2 million cold calls over the last 12 years. And of course, we're always 100% invested in our clients and their business growth. So sales development and cold calling through specifically a sales development program is part of what we call the fastest path to revenue. So this fastest path to revenue is a concept that we developed here over the last 12 years, and certainly the ideas around this concept started way earlier than that. And it's really designed for B2B companies who sell complex or technical solutions. Now, I say that, I want you to know that if you happen to not have a complex or technical solution, or if you're not even in B2B and you're a B2C salesperson or a sales leader, you will absolutely get insight and some takeaways from this presentation today. So I don't want you to check out on me. But the fastest path to revenue is really about having a full funnel approach to demand generation that begins by understanding the broad business objectives and then creating a growth strategy for your organization that includes establishing a middle of the funnel sales development process. So if you look at that funnel, cold calling and sales development sit right in the middle of that process. And once you establish a sales development program through cold calling, you're going to get unbelievable insight into your target accounts, the types of people that you want to be selling to, or what we call personas, and a chance to really validate your value proposition. It's one of the easiest ways to get real customer input on your value proposition. Whenever you share that with the customer on a cold call and they tell you they don't understand what you're talking about, you know that you need to work on that value prop. You know that you need to work on your positioning statements. And so that is feedback that they don't give you through email, unfortunately. No one reads your email and sends you a reply and says, I didn't quite understand what you meant by this, or I think you're not talking to the right person because I wouldn't do this. They just delete your email and move on. Now that certainly tells us something, but it doesn't give you the same insight you get from a conversation with your customers. So let's jump into this. Mastering B2B cold calling, 5 ways to improve your cold calling effectiveness. Number 1, write and memorize your call plan. It sounds simple, but so many people will not take the time to really memorize what it is that they want to say. You need to know exactly what it is that you want to communicate to the customers. You need to have your opening and the value proposition. It needs to be second nature. It needs to be automatic. So you're only going to be able to really script the very first, let's call it 20 seconds of that call. The rest of the call is a dance. The first part is sort of your opening number. You get to do a little solo, right? That's how you start the conversation. The first couple questions you ask and how you get into your value proposition. You should know that absolutely cold. And not knowing that is just shows a lack of commitment to your craft. You need to know your message or your plan, your call plan, and you need to know it in a very deep way so that it's automatic and rolls off your tongue. You can't read it. Those are what people say to me all the time. Well, I can read it and it won't really sound like I'm reading it. Look, the customer will know. They're giving you just 20% of their attention in that first few seconds. They're looking at their computer. They got someone in their office. They're doing something else. They know they've got to get to a meeting. They pick up the phone. You've just got a fraction of their attention. If it doesn't feel authentic and powerful, and you can't get their attention with your confidence, then they're just going to check out and get off the phone as quickly as they can. And the other thing about memorizing the call plan is you can't listen to what the prospect is saying to you if you're thinking about what you're going to say next. Okay, let me say that again. You can't listen. You can't actively listen if you're trying to figure out what you're going to say next. That has to be second nature. You just have to know what it is that you want to communicate. Okay, so write it down, memorize it, and know it. Number two, your tone matters. Look, so many people miss this. I'll tell you, when we're hiring sales development reps for Pro Sales Connection to make calls on behalf of our clients, the first step in that process is a phone conversation. It's the very first step. I want to know what you sound like. We might even schedule a 15-minute phone call just to have a brief conversation. I've even employed, when we had massive hiring that we had to do, we'd employ voicemails. We'd ask people to call and leave us a voicemail. And I just need to know what your voice sounds like. The tone of your voice is super important. And don't think, well, look, I don't have a great tone in my voice, or there's nothing I can do about it. I sound like I sound. Look, that's a cop-out, right? You have to cultivate a friendly and energetic tone. Even if it's not your nature to speak that way, look, you're trying to get a job done. So understand that your tone is going to matter. If you have low energy, people don't want to listen to you. If you're not friendly, people don't want to talk to you. It's just plain and simple. You sound like someone people would want to talk to. That's your job. And so one of the ways I like to talk to people about this is, how would you sound on a first date? Look, if you're excited to go on a date with a person and you pick them up and you're going on a date, like, what would you sound like? You would sound energetic and friendly. You would sound like you have confidence, that you're excited to be there. That's what you should sound like on every single phone call that you make. And that's an important point. Look, it's not good enough to sound high energetic and friendly for the first 20 calls that you make that day. You have to sound like that on the last call that you make of the day, because you never know when you're going to get that connection, when you're going to have that person ready to talk back to you. And if you mail it in on your 100th call of the day or your 40th call of the day or however many calls you plan to make, if you mail that in, you will not get the results that you're looking for. All right, so your tone matters a lot. Number three, multitasking is a myth. Look, don't think that you can just mix in some cold calls throughout your day. Well, I've got this done, but I've got a couple minutes, so I'm gonna make a couple quick calls. Look, it just won't work. It won't work at scale. Let me put it that way. You can make the phone calls and you might even get lucky and have a conversation, but are you really gonna be at your A game? Are you really gonna give that prospect everything that you've got if you're switching tasks back and forth and trying to multitask? Look, schedule time to make your calls. And I suggest that you have at the very least, a 2-hour window. At least a 2-hour window to make calls. Block out everything else. Turn off your IM, turn off your email inbox, and just really focus. Log into your CRM, pull up your list, however you got your data organized, and start making calls and really put the blinder on and really think about what you're going to say. And think about being present in that moment, and think about this call as the most important call that I'm going to make today. Find a rhythm so that you make the most of your time, right? So bouncing around doesn't allow you to get into a rhythm. And a rhythm happens whenever you have a great call and the next call is likely to be even better. When you have a great call, it breeds success. Success breeds success. You start to get into a positive mind frame, like the next call is going to be just this good. This is exciting. So because that's a dynamic that I've seen happen over and over again with 2 million cold calls made, resist the temptation to switch to sales mode after a good call. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see salespeople make. They have a great call, they have a great cold call, they have a great conversation with the prospect. The prospect gives them some action items, there's some takeaways from the conversation, you're super excited, you hang up the phone and you start working those action items. You start putting together the emails, you start finding the materials the customer asked for, you start making follow-up calls to get answers to the questions the customer had. Stop. Don't get out of your rhythm. Make your notes, put them in your CRM, organize it, set a task to remind yourself to do that later on in the day or the next day or whenever you've got time set aside for after call work or follow-up. Don't get out of your calling mode when after you have a good call. You really have to concentrate and keep that momentum going, okay? Multitasking, it's a myth. Number 4, the last one to talk about it. Look, I had a mentor years and years and years ago when I was first getting into the sales game. And, you know, he told me, this is a lesson he learned from retail, and I've used it consistently over the last 25 years. Look, the last one to talk about it. Maybe you've heard this expression, but this really comes from, if you ask for the meeting, so you've had a good conversation with the prospect, they've qualified themselves in some way, you think it's appropriate to try to move to scheduling a meeting. You ask for the meeting and then you stop talking. Just stop. Be quiet. Give it a beat and let them answer you. They're either going to book that meeting or they're going to give you an objection. Either way, let them make the next move and then respond to whatever they say. This is one of the easiest things to fix. It's uncomfortable, but it's so easy because you've done everything right up to this point. You've had a great conversation. You've qualified the prospect. You've built some rapport. They're engaging with you. You've asked for the meeting. You've done everything right. And then you ask for the meeting and you give it a second and they don't say anything and you start convincing them that they need to reconsider. You've assumed the worst. You start selling again. Well, look, you know, the reason I want to meet again is we want to do this and we want to do that. Just give them a second. I tell people, give it enough time to where it feels uncomfortable for you. And that'll be different for everybody, but there's an uncomfortable amount of silence. Feel how uncomfortable that was, right? Give it that much time. Just give it time, okay? I guarantee you'll have better results from that, because if you start talking again, they've moved on and they won't commit. Number 5, know your rebuttals cold. So I talked about knowing your call plan cold. The next thing that you have to do is you really have to know your rebuttals. Know them inside and out. Know exactly how you're going to respond to every single common objection that you hear during the course of your prospecting calls. There are really 5 objections that will usually account for 80% of the objections you get. So think about for yourself what those 5 objections are. Take some time, work with your team, work with your boss, work with your customers who already love you, and figure out, how am I going to handle that rebuttal? Or how am I going to handle that objection? What will be my objection handling strategy for that? So think about some of the most common ones are, I'm really busy right now. How are you going to respond to that? What are you going to say when they say that? You've heard it before. Have a plan for how you're going to respond to that to keep the conversation moving forward. and not using that as an out to say, well, okay, I don't know what to say here, so look, I understand, can I try you back? Forget about that. Have a plan for how you're going to respond. Another common objection is, well, we don't have the budget right now. How are you going to handle that? We already have a vendor that we love. Okay, how are you going to handle that? Okay, we've tried this before, it didn't work. How are you going to handle it? Come up with a list of the objections that you hear the most often and create a plan for them. And prepare to overcome at least 2 objections before ending the call. You should try to overcome at least 2 objections. Well, I'm really busy right now. Overcome the objection, move on to the meeting again. Hey, well, okay, well, I appreciate that, but I think, we looked at this before, it just wasn't a fit for us. Overcome the objection again and move to close. Okay, if after 2 objections they're still not willing to meet, then it's probably time to let them go. There's some people will say keep going until you get shut down. I think it depends on your business, but if you are working with high-level decision makers, 2 is about all I would recommend going, or you risk losing losing credibility with that prospect, and they won't ever consider working with you again, which you can't really afford to do. If you're calling people to sell magazines at home, handle objections all day long and just keep coming back at them. You've got nothing to lose because there's another 300 million people to call, right? So don't worry about it. But in a B2B world selling technical and complex solutions, you really can't afford to burn that contact. So but handle 2. It's also, there's a balance, right? So there's a law of diminishing return. And I think that's around that 2 objections, but understand if you get 1 objection and stop, you may never get another chance to speak to that prospect. They're too hard to reach. They answer the phone so infrequently. You have to have a plan, and you have to give it a really concerted effort to overcome those objections and move to the meeting. Okay. Always reclose after the handling of the objection, as I mentioned before. Handle the objection, ask for the meeting. Get another objection, handle the objection, ask for the meeting again. Get a 3rd objection, ask if you can send them some information and if you can follow up with them at another time and move on with your life, right? But don't burn the bridge, but don't give up too quick, right? It's a balance. All right, so, I forgot about this. So I always try to give you guys something on these webinars, something that's really useful for you aside from the information that I'm presenting. And for years we've been using a cheat sheet here of objection handling strategies for some of the most common objections that we get. And they're very generalized because we make calls for all kinds of technology companies, all kinds of B2B companies. And so I pulled that document up and looked at it and thought, hey, this would be really cool to share with people. So I'm gonna give you a really, really, really valuable document that we've cultivated. Some of these objection handling strategies are not our own. Some of them are twists on common strategies. But this is more of a curated list of ways to handle probably, I think it's 7 or 8 of the most common objections that you're likely to get. I mentioned some of them earlier. So if you want that bonus, because it's so valuable, I'm going to make you work just a little bit for it. So please, so bear with me. On our ProSales Connection LinkedIn page, so if you go to the company page for ProSales Connection, the most recent post that we made there is about this webinar today. Just go in there and comment that you want the objection handling scripts, and I will send them to you right away. I already have your information because you've registered for our webinar. So go to LinkedIn, go to our company page, not my personal page, go to our company page, find the post, which is the most recent post, and just make a comment there, and we will send you that cheat sheet. It's really, really cool. When I pulled it up again the other day and went through them, I'm like, these are as solid today as they were probably 7 or 8 years ago when we put this together. So I'm happy to share that with everyone. All right, so along with some of the best practices, there's a ton of mistakes that we see people making cold calls make, a ton of mistakes. And so I've highlighted here 2 of what I think are the most, or sorry, 5 of what I think are the most common and most impactful mistakes that I see people making cold calling use. And so we're going to go through those now. So number 1, Kill the pleasantries. Oh my goodness gracious, kill the pleasantries. Look, only salespeople start a conversation with how are you doing today? Did you realize that? Think about that for a second. Have you ever had a conversation with anyone in your life that started with, over the phone, that started with, how are you doing today? That wasn't a sales conversation. Your friends don't call you and say, how are you doing today? Your coworkers don't call you and say, how are you doing today? They just don't. Your customers don't call you and say, how are you doing today? The only people that start conversations with how are you doing today are salespeople. It's your biggest tell. Before you even say anything about what it is that you're calling for, your solution, your product, your service, they know that you're a salesperson and they're immediately trying to figure out how to get off of this phone call. Serious business people are busy and you're interrupting their day. Just get right into your call, get right into your message, move straight into your message. How are you doing today? Just gives them time to think about, how am I going to get rid of this guy, right? Kill the pleasantries. Number two, sorry, I skipped one there. Number two, don't sell on a cold call. A cold call has one mission: to further the conversation with the prospect, not to sell something. You sell when you have a scheduled meeting and permission to sell. A cold call is to set up a call where you have permission to sell to them. So don't sell on a cold call. No B2B prospect will buy on a cold call. So stop trying to sell. Look, they're not going to buy from you on a cold call. Stop it. All you're doing is hurting yourself. You're making the calls too long. You're asking for too much. You just interrupted their day. You just caught them off guard. They don't know who you are. And now you're going to try to, share with them all the ins and outs of your product and why it's better than the competition. Stop. That's not the time for that. Sell the meeting. That's it. That's all you should be selling, is the meeting. Sell why they should invest 15, 30, an hour, whatever amount of time that you think is appropriate for your next conversation. You should be selling that investment, why they should invest in that half hour on the phone with you or your company. That's the goal of a cold call. It's not to sell something. Know what you need to qualify the meeting, get it and get out. Have a real plan. Know exactly what it is that you want to know from this call. What information do you need to gather? What commitments do you need from them? Know exactly what it is that you need, the minimum that you need, get what you need, and get off the phone. All right? Leave them wanting more. Right? All right, number three, don't sound like a salesperson. So this is what I tell my people all the time. If you want to get treated like a salesperson, sound like one. Look, people have been conditioned and they already have their standard playbook for how they want to get rid of a salesperson. They know when they're talking to one and they know they don't want to be having that conversation with them. Like when you walk into a retail store, you walk into a clothes store and you walk in and that salesperson comes up to you and says, can I help you find something? Or, are you looking for something in particular? And they have one of their approach openings, right? I assure you, and I know you'll agree with this, 99% of us say, no, thank you. I'm just looking. Isn't that what we all say? No, thanks, I'm just looking. Or I'm just looking today. That's it. That's all we'll say. That's not even true. It's just not true. You went in there looking for something. You went in there saying, look, I need to get some blue jeans. But instead of having a salesperson help you find the blue jeans that you're looking for, you tell them, no, I'm just looking. Because it's a gut reaction. It's an immediate reaction to trying to put off the salesperson because you're afraid of what that sales conversation engagement is going to feel like, and you don't want to feel any pressure. You don't want that experience, and so you just tell them, no, I'm just looking. The salespeople, the prospects that you're calling on the phone to make your pitches are thinking the exact same thing. They're reacting the same way. So if you sound like a salesperson, they want to treat you like one. They're ready to say, no, I'm just looking. That's what they want to try to communicate to you, right? So you can't sound like a salesperson. So you think, well, what the hell, man? I am a salesperson. What am I supposed to sound like? Look, find another way. Find another approach to the prospect that breaks up that salesperson customer dynamic. Find another way to approach. One of the strategies that we use at Pro Sales Connection is something that we call an administrative approach. When I'm calling to get a meeting with a prospect, I want to sound like I'm an administrator, not a salesperson. I want to give the impression that I'm there to just facilitate the booking of a meeting, that I'm not there to sell anything. Selling is someone else's job. That's what I want to try to communicate to them through my tone and the way that I start my conversation. If I sounded like a salesperson, if I said, hey, how you doing today? Oh, hey, let me ask you, are you familiar with such and such? Let me tell you about why we're so wonderful. Goodness gracious, they can't wait to get off the phone with you. But if you started that conversation like, hey, I work for so-and-so, and they asked me to reach out to you to find out what the process would be for getting a meeting scheduled next Thursday. I was hoping you had some time at 2 o'clock. They're like, well, hang on a second. What is this about? Why does this person want to meet with me? Who are you? What is this company? They've invited a conversation now, and I've broken up the pattern of salesperson customer dynamic. Now they've invited me to have a conversation with them. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up. Let me tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Right? They've asked to have the dialogue with me. I've broken up that dynamic, that salesperson customer dynamic. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. Find something that breaks that up that works for you, but don't sound like a salesperson. Number 4, this is a controversial one. There are going to be people who probably email me after this call and say, I can't believe you just said that to my sales guys. I can't believe that you're telling people to stop doing so much pre-call research. Like, it's one of the biggest delay strategies that I see salespeople use. And if I thought it made sense, and if I thought that it would make a difference and it would improve the effectiveness of your calling, and you would get a better return on investment by doing tons of pre-call research, then I'd be here saying, do tons of pre-call research, because ultimately what I'm about is getting the results from the calls. That's what I'm after. I'm after results. And what I've learned through years and years, essentially decades at this point, of watching this process and measuring this process carefully, is that there's a massive diminishing return. Again, there's that term again, diminishing return to pre-call research. You don't need to know everything about the prospect to make a cold call. You don't need to know everything. Your desire to know everything about them is number one, is a way, it's a fear mechanism. It's a way for you to procrastinate, which is nothing but delaying the inevitable, and it's based in fear. If you're afraid to make the call. So you think, if I can know everything about the prospect, there's nothing that they can say to me that is going to throw me off my game. I'll be prepared for every scenario. Well, you can't prepare for every scenario. I don't care how much research you do. You just can't prepare for every scenario. So stop trying to prepare for as many scenarios. Understand who the prospect is, what their role in the company is, what the company does, how the company makes money. And then with that information, you should know what value you can bring to someone in that role, in someone with those circumstances. You should know that about your own solution. You don't need to know any more than that. You don't need to know where they went to college. You don't need to know where they worked 3 jobs ago. You don't need to know how many international locations they have unless it's really important to your solution. Okay, stop doing so much pre-call research. It just slows you down. If you did twice as much research, then I'm suggesting you'd make half as many phone calls. And what I'm telling you is you'll get a better return for making twice as many calls than you will knowing tons about half as many people. Hope that made sense. You'll get a better return for making twice as many calls as you will knowing twice as much about half as many people. That's just how the math works. I've seen it over and over again. I try to limit our team to 2 minutes. 2 minutes to research. Look at the name, look at the company. What is their role? What is the company? What does the company do? Okay, got it. That took me 45 seconds. Review my notes. Who did I talk to last? When was the last time I made a phone call to this person? Have I sent them any emails yet? Is there a gatekeeper? And what is the gatekeeper's name? Done. I'm ready to make a call. And I'm prepared for just about any of the scenarios that are likely to happen. I know what I need to know to be effective. When Janet, the receptionist, answers the phone and I can say, hey, is this Janet? And she says yes, man, I'm home free. Look, that's really useful information. Whether or not this person was promoted 6 years ago or 8 years ago is not relevant to me being successful in that call. Find the information that's really important for you to be effective. Have a system in place to capture that information. Ideally, that'd be a CRM where you're keeping notes, and then get on with making the phone calls. Research will just slow you down. Okay, stop doing as much research. Feel free to send me the emails if you have a counterpoint. Number 5, you're leaving insight on the table. If they won't meet with you, if you go through your entire call plan, and you have a conversation with your target and they just won't agree to meet, do you know why? Am I talking to the right person? Is there some reason why my solution wouldn't be effective in their specific environment? What are those unique conditions at that particular customer that I need to know and make notes of so that I know how to handle this prospect or other prospects at this particular company in the future? Do I know what they're doing now? What system are they using now? What software are they using now? What service are they using now? Do I know who the incumbent is? Do I understand how decisions are made? Hey, look, I understand you can't meet with me right now. It doesn't make sense for you. But just help me understand, just for my knowledge, when you do decide to make a selection or change vendors, can you tell me a little bit about what that process looks like? I've already told them, hey, look, I know we're not going to meet. And he feels just a tinge, he or she feels just a tinge of guilt that they've disappointed you. That's a real thing. Customers feel that. They're like, they don't want to be a jerk, but they also don't want to waste their time. So they've won. As far as they're concerned, that prospect has absolutely won this engagement. I did not agree. I did not fall to the pressure of this sales guy, and I did not agree to the meeting. I've won this interaction, is what they're thinking. And that causes them just a little bit of guilt. So they want to do something for you. Let them do something for you. Let them share some information with you. How are decisions made here? You know, when you make decisions, what's important to you when you're selecting a vendor like this? Who else in the organization should I be meeting with? You know, who is involved in the decision-making process? Do I have your title right? I have your email address as this. Can I just confirm I've got it right in case we need to send you something in the future? Is this your direct number, by the way? Would you mind if I send you a LinkedIn request? Get something. Learn something more about the prospect. Take the relationship a little bit further. Don't leave insight on the table. You made the call. You went to all the trouble to prepare for, to plan, to memorize your script, to know your rebuttals. You asked for the meeting. They said no. Don't give up there. Learn something, capture something, make that call something of value to you in the future, down the road. All right, number 5. All right. Okay, by my count, we still have a couple minutes left. I committed to getting out of here at 15 till. Look, that was a lot of information. I'm curious, look, who got something out of that? Did we get something? Did we learn something today? I hope you did. This is really exciting information for me to share. I love talking about cold calling and prospecting. I've spent my life perfecting this craft, and so I'm excited to be able to share what we've learned over the years with you. So hopefully you got a lot of information out of that. Go into the chat, leave me a comment, make a comment there. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you heard today that was new information for you, what your key takeaway might have been. I'd love to get that information from you. So I know we've just had a little bit of time together, but I just wanted to let you know that we will have another webinar. We've got a monthly webinar series that we're doing. This one obviously about cold calling from a sales development standpoint. Our next webinar will be on using email in outbound sales development. So we've talked about how to use the phone in outbound sales development. Now we want to talk about how to use email in outbound sales development, one of our other powerful tools for doing outreach. And if that sounds like a topic that you'd be interested in, leave me a chat or leave me a note in the chat. Tell me, yeah, I'd love to hear about email. By the way, if there's something else you want to hear about, or if there's something that I've shared with you already at this point that you want me to expand on in maybe future webinars, because I know we're really close to being out of time, please put that in the comments too. We'll take a look at that, and I'll get back to you if you have a specific question. All right. So to my next slide. So what do we do for our clients? So very briefly, just, you can look at this, and kind of review it on your own. But this is just an overview of some of the services that we offer clients to help them build sales pipeline and develop an effective and predictable pipeline of a perpetual revenue generation. That's what we're after here. And this is some of the ways we do that. Cold calling we've talked about today. And there are other strategies that we can employ, tactics that we can employ on your behalf as an agency. So I won't go through a lot of these, but these are just some examples of some of the clients that we've worked with, some of the pipeline we've generated: 690,000, 12.3 million for ZSpace, 7.7 million for GeoForce. So there's a lot of, we've got a lot of experience building really significant pipelines for our clients. If you have any questions and you'd like to book a quick call with me, you can do that. This is the link that you can use. Maybe take your phone out, take a quick picture of it. ProSalesConnection.com/15-minute exploratory call. That will go straight to me. You can book 15 minutes on my calendar anytime I'm available. I'm happy to have a 15-minute call with anyone about anything. So if that's something you might be interested in, you've got a question, you think I can help you, love to speak with you there. That's the best way to book some time. And so here's my contact information. Again, Mike Faraday, and owner of ProSales Connection. And I'm really, really excited to have shared this information with you today. I'm grateful for your attention and the time that you spent with me. I had a lot of fun putting this presentation together. Hopefully you took some real tangible things away from this that can impact your cold calling activities today, this afternoon. And if there's something you heard today that you thought was meaningful, try it. Try it now. Try it the next time you get on a phone call. Try it. And let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear from you. That's my email address. Love to talk with you, and certainly the link again for how to set up a meeting with me.